The Tigers drop a spring training game to the Braves. We're going to talk about the notable performances from there, and then we are going to player preview the 2024 season for Alex Lange, all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All righty. Hope everyone's having a fantastic week so far here at the halfway mark. We are going to discuss the Tigers 3-0. They got shut out. We'll talk about that in a second. Talk about the big performances and whatnot from a spring training game. Obviously, as we say always, spring training games with a grain of salt, which is why it only usually takes up a segment, maybe segment and a half of the show, versus in the regular season, we spend the entire show talking about every game. So we'll talk about that. We are also going to then spend a majority of the show, or hopefully a majority of the show, talking about Alex Lange. The thing with Alex Lange is that I'm not sure it's actually that long of a discussion. Now, I have a notorious history for saying that, it's not that long of a conversation, and then talking, and putting out 45-minute long episodes. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's pretty straightforward what we all want to see from Lange this year, and what kind of his biggest, area of concern is, I guess we'll say. But we're going to start off by talking about this ball game, a 3-0 loss at the hands of the Atlanta Braves. Tigers are now 6-5. The Braves are also 6-5. If you're somebody that cares about win and loss record in spring training, the biggest reason as to why you see a big old goose egg on the scoreboard for the Tigers is because the Braves threw out Strider and then piggybacked Charlie Morton. So you went and you had Strider went 4 and Morton went almost 3. So between the two of them, you covered just about 7 innings of work. And I think that's probably why you see. And then at the end of the game, when they started throwing in some of their relievers and maybe some of their not major league caliber relievers, the Tigers lineup was already, we were putting out guys that aren't going to play Major League Baseball for us either by that late into the ball game. So again, I say it all the time, not really concerned with team results stuff in spring training, but individual results obviously matter. Some matter much more than others. I want to start off by talking about Reese Olson here. He went 3 innings, 2 hits, no earned runs, no walks, and 4 strikeouts. Great. He looked great. And this game was actually televised. It was streamed, I guess. It wasn't on cable, but was streamed online through the Braves website. And Reese Olson, he looked the best he's looked in the spring so far. This is the reason why we say what we say about spring training. In the first start, everybody was running around, and not everybody, I shouldn't say generalize that much, but there were plenty of people that were like, oh my goodness, Reese Olson just sucks now. Oh my goodness. We're hurt. It's okay, let's take a deep breath. It's February baseball. This is March baseball at least. But Reese Olson looked much improved in this one. No walks, I think, is probably the biggest thing there. But even just the slider in general, obviously, is such a weapon, and that's been his calling card since he got called up. That's not a new conversation for anybody listening here, but it is just so effective with it, and it moves so much. I think the biggest thing I want to continue to see, and we'll talk about this a lot more as we get closer and closer to the regular season, is the improved fastball. I feel like I've said that after every single spring training outing he's had. If you're a longtime listener and you were listening last season, you heard me say that all the time with him down the stretch, especially earlier in the year, and he had improved a little bit down the stretch, but I need more effectiveness out of the two-seam fastball, sinker fastball thing he's got going on. But I thought the changeup was stellar in this game. I really think that was my biggest takeaway, was how good his changeup looked. Everybody knows the bread and butter is going to be the slider, sweeper, whatever you want to label it, that he has. But having that changeup look like it did on Tuesday is pretty darn impressive. So, yeah, the biggest thing I'm going to continue to look for is just the effectiveness of fastball, effectiveness of fastball. And if he can do that, then we got a guy who has the potential to be a pretty darn good starting pitcher on our hands. The other big performance from the Tigers pitching staff in this game was Wilmer Flores. 2 innings, 2 hits, no earned runs, 1 walk, and 3 strikeouts. Consistently pumping cheddar in this game. I mean, was hitting 99 multiple times. We talked about that a little bit more in depth last week, but just worth reiterating, man. He went from undrafted free agent to really flying up draft boards in 2022, right after a couple of like fine years at the beginning. Was a flamethrower-esque type of pitcher, was just blowing it past people, moved up to AA, plateaued last year, and the velocity went down. I mean, the velocity went like pretty significantly. Like, this is a guy that was touching like 92, 93 last year. And now this year in spring training so far, in all of his outings, has consistently been pumping 99 whenever he goes to the fastball. The breaking stuff is in the upper 80s. Really good differential there. Good shape as well. A big question mark he has had for a while has been the changeup. So got to get a few more looks of that, see the effectiveness of that. But the slider is going to be a really, really important pitch for him as well, if he's going to be kind of that power thrower. So all, still a work in progress. Still want to see the updates on the secondary type of pitches, but what an absolute pleasant surprise this spring has been for Wilmer Flores on the radar gun. Just seeing 99. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card after what we saw out of him last year. So they changed some stuff mechanically, and also it's just a mindset thing. He's talked about it. He's like, yeah, I want to go back to being the flamethrower. I feel like I took a step off the pedal a little bit last year. Too much of a pure starter mindset, whatever. Let's just go out and give each hitter his best stuff. So I don't know if that means long-term that's more likely he becomes a reliever. I'm totally fine with a multi-inning reliever that can pump 99, but we'll see. They're obviously going to keep him in the rotation down in the minors to start off the season. So it would obviously be an even more wonderful thing if he could translate this into 5, 6, 7 innings of work. So we will see. But so far in spring training, great storyline. Just a lot of question marks remaining. Good question marks, exciting, optimistic question marks, but a lot more question marks remaining for Wilmer Flores. A few more notable performances on the offensive side of the ball. Not a lot. Really, the only one that stands out is Kerry Carpenter's return to said starting lineup. Went 1 for 3, so did play a lot. He was the DH. He wasn't in the field, but played almost the whole game. I want to say he got pulled in like the 7th inning or something like that. So did get some ABs. Really cool quote that a few of the beat writers were passing around on Tuesday was he had said that he prepared to face Strider by having live BP against Jackson Jobe. And that got everybody in the fan base excited because Carpenter was like, yeah, like it's pretty similar. It's like, all right, let's not freak out, but maybe like freak out for like 30 seconds, get really excited, and then like snap back to reality. Like we got to calm down and kind of, limit our reactions there to a quote like that, but still really cool to hear. And yeah, a knock, and he was putting the ball in play all day. He didn't have a strikeout. Actually, his first AB against Strider is his first at bat of the spring, obviously. Opposite field cranked, fly out to the warning track, Oppo. So yeah, obviously we've talked about Kerry Carpenter a lot recently. A lot of question marks surrounding, kind of what his ceiling is. I think that's kind of the biggest question mark left. I think we have a decent idea of the floor. Obviously, like I said, we did his player preview recently. Kind of did an in-depth dive on him, but yeah, good to see him back out there and taking good hacks and playing pain-free. That's obviously the goal. So, yeah, if he's 100% by opening day, which it looks like now he's going to be, then 2 thumbs up there. Let's keep the ball rolling. I have 1 or 2 more performances from this game that I want to point out, and then we'll get into Alex Lange. All right, we'll do all of that right after this. football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for the playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. So get in on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, college basketball, etc. entries on PrizePick, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Players, you know what? It's actually really funny. Some of the prize picks from yesterday, as you're listening to this, was some really interesting ones out there. Obviously, the NBA, as we've been talking about, big time of year, and there was some fun one with the Lakers. Obviously, LeBron's always a hot topic of conversation, but D'Angelo Russell snapping the other day, so that was kind of a fun one too. Obviously, at your own risk, you can play with the Pistons as well. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's LOCKEDONMLB for up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all so much for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back tomorrow. We have an off day, so we'll try to knock out a couple of player previews, unless there's any news to discuss around Tigers land. But yeah, we'll probably use that to crank out some more player previews with the first off day of the spring for us. So also be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Okay, so only other players I want to bring up in this spring game. Joey Wentz, 1 inning, 1 hit, 1 earned run, 1 walk, no strikeouts. Kind of got hit decently hard in this one and would kind of have to tightrope his way out of danger there. Only gave up the 1 run. It's not the worst line in the world for sure, but I don't think he looked particularly effective in this one. And we've said this a lot in spring already, and it's something that we brought up over the winter as well. This dude is out of options. He is out of major league options. So if he is to not make the Detroit Tigers opening day roster, he will be put on waivers. And I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people just think that after last season, this dude is just like terrible, et cetera, et cetera. He is a lefty that has a plus changeup. And the only thing that's really missing is the ability to throw the fastball. Now, I trust Feder, London, Nieves with my life at this point. So, like, if they can't figure it out, I'm okay with, like, if there's a pitcher that they are like, we don't know what else to do, I'm okay moving on from them just because I trust the pitching side of the organization for the first time in my entire life. But I'll tell you what, he will be claimed. Like, I'm rather confident that a lefty that's that young still and does have decent secondary stuff to work with, and doesn't, the fastball isn't ineffective because it's slow. It's ineffective for a plethora of reasons that we've talked about over the winter and into the spring of this show. But it's not like he throws 86. Like he's a guy that can throw into the mid 90s when he's coming out of the bullpen and has some decent secondary stuff. So we'll see. That's not a decision that has to be made today. It won't be made today. That'll be a decision they wait until, I would imagine, the last possible second to make. I think Wentz, if he doesn't make the opening day roster, is going to be one of the last cuts on the roster. And maybe he turns it around and, his next 3 appearances, he looks really, really sharp. And there you go. There's your decision. He's on the roster, but he does not have any major league options. So every time he goes out on the bump, it's, again, I know I clown on spring training all the time, but like that is why, those are the moments that do matter in spring training is how does Joey Wentz look? Because he is quite literally not only playing for a job on the major league roster, but potentially playing for a job to even just remain in this organization, period. So we will see. Obviously, that's a lot of weight on the on the dude's shoulders. I just completely blanked on the phrase for the dude. So that is one of the other things I wanted to bring up. Brant Herter continues his 0 ERA as well. Really liked him in the minor leagues last year, and just wanted to give him a quick shout. Won't make the major league roster out of camp or anything, but somebody I think a lot of people should kind of have their eyes on. I think that's probably it. Winfield Perez with a knock. Colt Keith getting ABs, drew a walk in this game. Eddie's Leonard with another AB. Yeah. Ryan Kreidler throwing error, but made a heck of a play to get to that ball. So kind of flashing the leather a little bit in this one. Had a walk and a hit as well. So another guy that's kind of a fringe roster candidate there. Let's move on to Alex Lange. Okay. Alex Lange is going to be our player preview. Oh, Alex Lange. I've said it before, this isn't a surprise to anybody, right? Like what we're going to talk about. And that's why we'll see how long this conversation goes. But we are all very aware that his biggest thing is just throw more strikes. We're aware. He's aware. The organization is aware. The coaching staff is aware that there's nobody near or around the Detroit Tigers organization, from fans to personnel to players, whatever, that don't understand that Alex Lange's biggest area that he wants to work on and has to work on for 2024 is just throwing the ball in the strike zone more. I think the most frustrating part about it, and I'm sure he's frustrated too, by the way, this is not talking down on someone. He has more talent in his right toe when it comes to the game of baseball than I've ever had in my entire life. But it's I think the most frustrating part about the situation is that I think he would, no one would hit his stuff if it was in the strike zone, right? Like he has the nastiest stuff you will see out there. It moves feet, right? He is absolutely disgusting. And his pitches move so unbelievably much that if he could just put everything in the strike zone, I don't think his numbers would be bad. Even if the hitter knew, okay, this is guaranteed a strike every time, I don't think he would have bad stats because of how remarkable his stuff is and how much movement his stuff has on it. So I think that is probably the biggest source of frustration for a lot of people. And again, I'm sure himself included. Last season, for as much heat as he got and as much of a hard time as he got, ended with a 3.68 ERA. Not bad. 10.77 K per nine. And then here, 6.14 walk per nine. That is remarkably high. That is like Gregory Soto, I'm pretty sure, was putting up, like his walk per nine was in the fives, I think, if I remember correctly. We can double check that later in the show, but I'm pretty sure, right? Like that's unbelievably high. And we'll talk about his walk rate, percentage and whatnot here in a sec, and where that stacks amongst the rest of baseball. But again, in 67 appearances, so 66 innings, a 3.68 ERA is not terrible. The WAR was negative 0.1, and the reason for that is because the predictive stats for Fangraphs, it was Fangraphs 0.1. Shouldn't say overall. A lot of people like Baseball Reference, where it was positive 1.1. So obviously a huge difference there. One of the reasons why is because Fangraphs uses predictive stats for pitchers' WAR. So FIP, right, XFIP, like that. It's either one of those two it uses for its WAR formula. And for those, he did not do well because he walked so many hitters, and those predictive stats weigh walks pretty heavily in terms of like how what your ERA quote unquote should have been, for lack of a better term, or if there were more innings, where it would kind of end up if water found its level, where your ERA would be. So for those stats, if it's lower than your ERA, then the numbers are telling you that, this is somebody. And again, these are all helpful tools. This is not an exact science, or else they wouldn't play the game. So take everything and every stat, just like, always, every single stat, you find out how much you want to weigh it personally. But that's why you see the negative 0.1, barely, but barely a negative WAR player. Whereas Baseball Reference, he was positive 1.1, which still, given where he was at after May, is still a disappointing end to the season. And obviously the reason for that was, his May. He was maybe the best pitcher in the entire game of baseball. His May, oh my goodness, his May stats. In 10 and 2/3 innings, he had a 0.84 ERA and a 0.84 whip. His opponent stats against were 0.91 average and a 395 OPS. 17 strikeouts in 10 games. That's absolutely redonkulous. Then in June, hitters had a 942 OPS against. That is May to June. Those months, for those keeping track at home, are next to each other. He went from the best reliever in the game of baseball in May to pretty much unusable in June, especially given that he was in high leverage situations. July, August, and September, 662 OPS, 631 OPS, 723 OPS, respectively. 13 walks in the month of August, alarmingly high. So again, as we've talked about, walks. He had 10 in the month of June, 13 in the month of August, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on. Everybody's well aware. The last stat I'll throw at you, his walk percentage was 15.6%. As we talk about, league average, depending on the year, is usually in the mid eights, anywhere from 8.2 up to like 8.6 or 8.7. And yeah, he was in the first percentile in baseball in walk rate. First percentile, bottom 1% in the entire league in walk rate. So yeah, I think that kind of proves the point there. But there is obviously still a lot to like in the fact that he had such a staggering walk issue and yet still had a sub 3.7 ERA. I think is fascinating to me, right? And his second half ERA was better than his first half. Now, again, a lot of that is because the month of June specifically was just awful, and that was his worst month, and that's obviously pre-All-Star break, but he had 11.57 ERA in the month of June. But that second half, I mean, even with the walks, July a 2.7, August a 4.5, and then September a 2.7 again. So there is still very much, this notion that, like he walks too many hitters, there's like he's not even a Major League Baseball player, there's just no spot for him on this team or whatever, is preposterous. Like there's still very much a ton of talent here, and it's just about maximizing that. And we will talk about how we can try to do that right after this. eBay are the best in the business. eBay Motors, we love talking about eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, we are talking about Alex Lange. First and foremost, it sounds like there has been quite a decent amount of work on his mechanics in the off season. So that is something that hopefully holds true and will have a good positive effect. We've seen a little bit of film on him. He's been televised a little bit here in the first week and a half or so of spring training. And there does seem to be a little bit less violence maybe in the follow through. But there's still, I want to see a lot more, right? I want to see legitimate sample size here before we jump to any big conclusions. But yeah, like this, there's some conversations out there about like Alex Lange, isn't guaranteed a roster spot or like shouldn't make the team. And like, look, his spring numbers aren't that good, whatever. I'll gladly be wrong about, anything if I'm wrong about it. I don't see any scenario in which this dude isn't on the opening day roster. Like, again, even with all of the super dramatic and absurd walk numbers, he had a sub 3.7 ERA. Like, that's not something that they're just going to let walk out the door and not try to maximize as best as they can, especially with, again, the coaches that they have in place currently that have been able to get a lot out of so many different calibers of players. And like, this guy was in the 99th percentile in whiff rate. 99th percentile. Only 1% of pitchers, qualified pitchers in baseball last year, induced more or induced a higher whiff rate. Remarkable stuff. 80th percentile in chase rate, 90th in expected batting average at only 206 expected batting average against, 78th percentile in strikeout rate. And when he got hit, he didn't get hit very hard. 65th percentile and 70th percentile in barrel rate and hard hit rate, respectively. Ground ball rate, 85th percentile, right? Because he throws that curveball so much. The one thing that I would really think would go a long way into him being able to establish the strike zone a lot more. But B, I just think there's a lot more of kind of untapped potential in the pitch specifically. He's really establishing, even if you don't like your four-seam fastball, which he barely threw last year, establish the sinker then, right? He has this rare sinker that moves so much. It could be a semi-effective swing and miss pitch. I think that, like last year, he had a 12.1% whiff rate on it. That's obviously not extremely high, and it is a sinker at the end of the day. I'm not expecting this thing to ever be, a 40% whiff rate type of pitch, but it moves a boatload. And I think that it also could be his a really good weapon for a cold strike pitch. Now, again, that involves being able to throw the ball in the strike zone at a little bit more of ease than he did last season. But that is like really the only thing besides just, again, becoming more mechanically sound that the organization has obviously been working on and going to continue working on with him. As far as sequencing goes, I would just like him to establish the sinker a little bit more. That thing moves so much. Worst case scenario, you hit a ton of ground balls. And again, that's what he did on the few balls that were put in play, because he was mostly strikeout or walk. A lot of them were ground balls. Last season, a 51% ground ball rate, league average 44.6. Again, we said it top 20, 15% in all of baseball in that regard. So don't be afraid to use that. You don't have to get a strikeout on you don't have to get a whiff on every single pitch. You don't have to get a strikeout on every batter. If throwing the sinker just is going to help him not be afraid. I don't think Alex Lange is really afraid of anything, but if that can help him establish the zone more, then that I think is my easiest kind of initial point that I can point at and be like, well, just try throwing the sinker more than the curveball maybe. And again, righty lefty splits, maybe that gets a little different, but there's so much movement. I don't see how that can be too much of an issue for him, for either handedness of the platoon. The curveball is the bread and butter, and it's what he throws a majority of the time. He's one of the few guys out there that throws a curveball 58% of the time, and it's because it's disgusting and pretty much unhittable. 171 batting average against, 276 slug. 48.4% whiff rate, 30% put away pitch rate. It's disgusting. We all are very aware of that. The thing is, if you can't throw the curveball for a low strike, okay, if you can't throw it at the knees and buckle the knees and get it at that low strike, and it's just consistently below the zone, then you have what the White Sox did, right? The White Sox faced Alex Lange twice in very short. It might have even been back-to-back games, but it was in May, late May, early June. It was like maybe it was a couple weeks apart, actually. And the first time they faced him, he didn't throw a single ball in the strike zone. He had a 1-2-3 inning. The pitch chart is remarkable. He literally does not throw a strike. He doesn't throw a ball in the strike zone, I should say. A lot of swings and misses, and he mowed them down. Everybody was like, oh my goodness, this is so crazy. He faced them again a few weeks later and didn't throw a ball in the strike zone and imploded. And he walked a ton of hitters. And I think can't remember, honestly, if he still got out of it or not. But gave up a lot of base runners in that outing because they're just like, all right, well, he's not going to throw the fastball. And he can't throw the curveball or the changeup in the strike zone. So, like, what's even the point, right? So I think that, again, that is why I would like him to throw the sinker more. But I think also just when it comes to the curveball, I'm not asking for this to be over the plate. No one wants a curveball down the middle. Okay, nobody has ever wanted that. That's not a recipe for success. But you need to be able to throw the curveball at the knees and then in the dirt, in the knees, in the dirt, somewhat consistently. You can't just only throw it in the dirt and expect it to work all year. So, and again, I'm not saying anything that I'm positive. I'm not saying anything that he and his camp and his coaching staff has not already talked about at length. The changeup, also a really, really good pitch. Only really throws it to lefties, but I have no issue with that. That's when it's most effective, and it's a really, really, honestly, elite pitch when it is, somewhere near the strike zone. And I think that you can throw the changeup more if you establish the sinker. I think that that's something I think he got a little bit too honed in on, like, I have to get swings and misses and get people to chase and get strikeouts all the time, when like the sinker, again, it has the ability to be an elite ground ball caliber pitch for him because of how much that pitch moves as well. So I think I'm not asking for him to throw the sinker, 55, 60% of the time. He can still do his thing and throw his curveball, 55 to 58% of the time, like he's done his whole career. But I would love the sinker to just get a little bit more established, because I think that opens up the door for everything else. So that's kind of my biggest thing with him. But again, this is really like splitting hairs. The biggest thing is obviously just throw the ball in the strike zone, and that's way easier said than done. I have the privilege of being able to just say that on air, and it sounds correct, because he didn't do that last year. That's way easier for me to say that than to actually execute that at the major league level. So throw more strikes, duh. And then again, I just think working with the mechanics, which is something that the team has done reportedly all winter with him, and hopefully we see the results of that. But at worst, you're going to get a season that looks like the middle of the year last year, where he just can't find the zone. People know that he can't find the zone, and he's a guy that's going to lose the high leverage kind of title that he had last season. At best, I mean, don't get me excited, right? Even if this guy is in the 25th percentile in walk rate, even if he's still in the bottom quarter of the league, right? You shave off, 5%, 3% of that walk rate. It's still high, but it's not, the worst in baseball. I think you're talking about a guy who could be one of the better relievers in the sport. That is his ceiling. That is legitimately his ceiling. But that all comes down to how often can you find the strike zone, brother. Again, not saying it, not reinventing the wheel here, not telling you anything you don't already know, but hopefully the little bit of insight, kind of where my head is at least, with the curveball, sinker, changeup kind of usage. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back tomorrow. All right. Yeah. No game tomorrow, so we'll be recapping, player previews and whatnot, talking about general news and notes of camp. I'll see y'all then, baby. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow. Go Tigers.